Welcome back to the AME Food Safety Show. Today's subsection topic is safe food handling, preventing cross-contamination. This is a particularly good issue for anyone who does their own shopping and own cooking. Safe food handling, preventing cross-contamination of bacteria from the animal to your digestive system. I'll just briefly prepare you for the idea of where bacteria comes from. 99% of the time, for harmful bacteria, E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria, it will be from the intestines of the animal, which has been cross-contaminated in the production process to the food that which you will be consuming. Let's start with a PowerPoint presentation I have prepared for today's discussion. Safe food handling, preventing cross-contamination. Why is this important? Again, the animals are raised in horrible conditions. They call factory farms. They're processed by factory workers in a food factory. Yes, they take safety measures, but the government allows X% of all food to be contaminated, believe it or not, particularly poultry. Poultry, in the last Foster Farms outbreak, I was reading in horror that 97% of all chickens have to be salmonella-free, but 3% can be contaminated with salmonella. What does that mean? That means that your bird that you take home can be 100% contaminated with salmonella, and it's within government specifications. To me, I find that unacceptable, and my passion is I don't want anybody in my household, particularly young people or old, to get sick and die. Let's look at the next slide. The challenge here is hand washing. You've heard it before. What you need to do is know the science. Underneath your fingernails are organisms trapped underneath your fingernails. And what you need to do is use soap, not just antibacterial alcohol-based cleansers. Why? They take 5 minutes residence time, and they have a reduced kill rate. You need to wash and scrub. There are two principles. One is the physical chemistry of the water, and then the other physical chemistry of washing your hand and scraping, and not just using an air dryer. I'll talk about that sometime. But to use a paper towel to physically scrape the organisms off and then throw that paper into the trash where the organisms are trapped and then disposed of. Next slide, please. Hand washing, you need a particular time. In hospitals, particularly with infectious disease specialists, they will tell you. You need to sing one verse of Happy Birthday to you. And keep scrubbing and keep washing. Remember the 3 physical chemicals. Use the chemical, the surfactant to rinse it off, makes it smooth and easy to come off for the organisms. The water, rinsing, and then the paper towel to wash off. Next slide. What we need to do when we actually wash and handle the particularly meat products is to cut or prepare that meat in a separate surface. It's known as a food preparation surface or food contact surface, separate from other types of produce and other food materials. Why? Because the food that you are preparing as meat is probably contaminated. E. coli 147H7 for red meat and salmonella for the other. Next slide, please. In chopping and cutting, I prefer that people use gloves. It's a little hard to do that at home, but it is a precaution, particularly if you have someone ill in your home. We have many people in the country that are on medication, and that's a precaution that I suggest strongly. And wood cutting boards have the ability to trap those organisms inside the wood, so that needs to be sanitized, usually after use and before use with, generally after use, and use a little bit of chlorine, Clorox if you will, and then rinse it off and let it dry. Next slide. In this particular slide, what we see are 2 people working, and the major issue is when you go into your favorite restaurant, let's say it's a bar and grill, you go in the back, look at the people preparing your food. Look at how they're handling it. And you sanitize before and after in your home. Why? Because you don't know who's been using that particular surface before you. Next slide. Washing of the materials. This is so important that you wash your plates and glasses after every use. Don't let them sit in the washing area for very long. Bacteria grows very rapidly, particularly around 72 degrees is where most people live. And so you must take extreme measures to keep your eating utensils clean. Over. Next slide. What we see here is what I talked to you about in that newspaper article, was that hamburger particularly needs to be cooked. Other types of food needs to be prepared properly. If you take a shortcut, you're taking a risk. Next slide. What we are doing with safe food handling is we're preparing to protect our own family, and I can't think of anything more important. I'll let you know something about soup. I travel a lot to Mexico because the government of Mexico is one of my clients for diagnostic testing. I require, when I go to Mexico, I only eat soups, and it better be coming to me boiled. And everything in that soup has got to be boiling. I got to see the bubbles. Why? Because it kills everything in that pot. 165 degrees at least. Usually it's 180, 200 degrees. Boiling temperature is the best security you have for safe food. Next slide. These are basic regulations for the handling of food. And there isn't anybody that shouldn't have learned this in high school, but if you didn't, clean the surfaces, separate the food, thoroughly cook the food products. Once you've finished and you have some left over, put it inside the refrigerator at the correct temperature. I believe I have another slide that, if it's not there, then we can look at it later. It's not there. Okay, it's in the other section. So from my perspective and my advice to anyone who eats, and by the way, I eat, and I believe everyone else does, is to thoroughly cook, clean, and store your food prior to consumption. Thank you very much. Next section after this message.